I'm Brian Winnekins at the Irrigation Association and National Groundwater Association's annual show and education conference in Las Vegas. And thank you to the National Groundwater Association, along with the Irrigation Association, BASF, Ashley Gausman, your representative serving Northwest Wisconsin, and Abyss Silo of Durand and the Animal Wellness Center of Buffalo Valley for supporting our broadcasts. I'm with Kevin McCray. He is CEO of the National Groundwater Association. And Kevin, thank you for joining us today. Happy National Groundwater Week. Pretty important week, not only for your organization, but really for everybody on the planet.
It really is. It is a critical resource, not only for drinking water supply, but as you've referred to, irrigation sector to help us feed people as well.
Let's talk about some of the big issues that National Groundwater is working on. Before we went on, talked about sustainability. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, groundwater sustainability, actually all water resources sustainability is critical as we see our planet's population grow and how populations are shifting in terms of where people choose to live. It puts greater stress on the resources that we have available. So we have to look at those resources and understand how we're going to extract them if it's groundwater and make them available over time for future generations. So we can't do kind of an all or nothing or full out application. We have to be very cautious and balanced, but we can certainly utilize the resource. It's not that we have to turn it off.
And this resource, especially for agriculture, is used extensively in the United States. There's some big numbers about how much water is used.
That's right. We can calculate from some work that the USDA has done along with the Census Bureau. There's about 476,000 irrigation wells across the United States, serving about 121,000 farms. And the United States Geological Survey estimates that we pump about 69.5 billion gallons a day on average of groundwater. Of course, in growing seasons, a little higher than when crops are dormant, but it's still it's our biggest use of groundwater in the United States and actually around the world.
Talking with Kevin McCray, he is CEO of the National Groundwater Association. All that water, and especially in the West where we've had droughts, and then in the Southeast where a drought has begun to develop, that then agriculture is using it. But then we get confrontations with cities, even in western Wisconsin and in Durand. There's concern that all of these high-capacity wells could affect the city of Durand's water supply because of the water table.
Right. Actually, you touched on something that we've noticed that's starting to occur, and we see that measured by the USDA's Farm and Ranch Irrigation Survey, and that is in the eastern United States, we're seeing a growth in the use of agricultural irrigation from groundwater that we hadn't seen previously. And in other places like the upper Midwest, what I would call the old Northwest territories of Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, Minnesota, yeah, we're starting to see more ag irrigation than we did before. Part of it's driven by commodity prices. The agricultural community, that's their livelihood, and if they can increase yields by applying water appropriately, it makes sense for them to do that. But there's a trade-off long term, and that is that we have to have that resource available for future generations as well.
When I had a chance to talk with Dr. McCormick as well from the the Water for Food Institute, one of the things we also chatted about was we have to protect the water that we have from pollution, because if it gets polluted, that then now we can't use it.
Well, it oftentimes makes it a lot harder to use it. It can be cleaned up, but that's an expense. And to clean up water to then apply it to agricultural practices is a really expensive proposition. But it doesn't necessarily have to be written off, but we need to be very cautious about what our practices are, be it from industrial or agricultural practices or even what we do in our own backyards. We operate a consumer information service called wellowner.org, which is available on the web, of course. And one of the things we talk about is that those 13.2 million households in the United States that have their own private well system, they have to be the stewards of their own drinking water supply. So, don't go and dump your used motor oil out on your ground and that's going to percolate into your own drinking water supply. Or keep your septic system maintained and properly sited, because that protects your drinking water supply. So even though we often think of these challenges maybe only being found in developing nations around the world, we have those same challenges here in the United States, and it largely requires an informed public to be responsible, and that's a big part of what the association tries to do.
Talking with Kevin McCray. He is CEO of the National Groundwater Association here at the Irrigation Association and Groundwater Association's annual education show and conference in Las Vegas. You made a mention of the private wells and even making sure we don't pollute them. Also, though, with agriculture and with the groundwater, agriculture can also play a role in being able to maybe clean up some of these issues by using the nutrients that's in that water to clean it out, but also help them at the same time.
Yeah, increasingly agriculture is learning to manage the water resource on site better than before, and take full advantage of any enhancements that have been added to help the crops grow, or to remove pesticides, or to remove pests through pesticides. So they're learning to manage that largely through proper application of the product as it was designed by the manufacturers. And if they do that, and then of course the remote sensing technology that's been developed in terms of when to apply water and when to apply nutrients has changed the equation dramatically. But there's always room for improvement. And we see a very responsible agricultural community, and that's why we were excited to partner with the Irrigation Association. Even though they're not directly ag, they're kind of a bridge to them as we are as well. And if we can all work in partnership, I think we can do that for the good of not only people in the United States but around the world.
Finally, Kevin, as well, when we were before we went on the air, we talked about the role of energy, and in western Wisconsin, southeast Minnesota, we're sitting on top of the largest frac sand deposit. Of course, frac sand is used in North Dakota, but even in our part of the country, taking that frac sand out, it has to be processed. We use water, and the frac sand is then used for the oil and gas production, and that uses water, and so that really generates a whole other set of issues.
It does. The oil and gas industry, of course, tries to be as responsible as it can to meet not only their industry standards and their practices, but the regulations that are imposed upon them, so that they handle the water that they need to produce oil and gas as appropriately as they can. But yeah, frac sand is an issue. Those sands are also where a lot of groundwater is contained. And when we disrupt those sands, then we disrupt the groundwater supply too. So we have to be cognizant of, as we're trying to do one thing, create affordable energy, we have to make sure that we're also being responsible in terms of what it might mean to the water resource down the road as well.
Kevin, again, we appreciate you joining us.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it very much.
Kevin McCray, he is the CEO of the National Groundwater Association. From the National Groundwater Association and Irrigation Association's annual conference and education show, I'm Brian Winnikins for Real Country 1430 WRDN.